I used to think that the worst thing that could happen on a Monday morning was spilling coffee on my blouse right before an important meeting. I was wrong. The worst thing that can happen on a Monday morning is picking up the wrong laptop bag on your way out the door and not realizing it until you are already 40 minutes into your commute, watching your husband's screen light up with a message that was never meant for your eyes. My name is Evelyn. I am 37 years old. I am a licensed occupational therapist, and until 8 months ago, I believed I had a marriage worth protecting. My husband, Scott, 41, is a regional sales director for a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company based out of Columbus, Ohio. We had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We owned a 3-bedroom house in a suburb called Worthington. We had a golden retriever named Biscuit and a standing reservation at our favorite Italian place on the second Friday of every month. We argued about whose turn it was to take out the recycling and whether the thermostat should be set to 68 or 70. That was the scope of our conflict. Or so I believed. The morning everything changed started the same way every Monday morning started. I woke up at 5:50, got dressed in the dark so I wouldn't wake Scott, made a thermos of coffee, and grabbed what I thought was my bag from the hook near the garage door. My laptop bag and Scott's were nearly identical, both black, both the same brand, a gift from his company's holiday party 2 years ago that I had also received as a patient appreciation gift from my clinic's vendor. The only difference was a small white tag I had tied to mine, but I had done that months ago, and the tag had apparently fallen off at some point without my noticing. I drove to my clinic, dropped off my jacket, and didn't open the bag until I was sitting at my desk. When I unzipped it and pulled out the laptop, I knew immediately it wasn't mine. The sticker on the corner, a small logo from a conference Scott had attended in Denver, told me everything. I had his. He had mine. I texted him. I grabbed your laptop by mistake. Yours is at the clinic with me. Mine should be there with you. He didn't reply. He was probably already in a meeting. I set his laptop aside and borrowed the spare desktop at the front desk to handle my morning notes. I would have left it at that. I would have simply swapped the bags at the end of the day, and that would have been the entire story. But around 11 in the morning, Scott's laptop chimed. A notification popped in the corner of the screen. I hadn't closed it. It was just sitting open on the desk beside me between patients. I glanced at it without thinking, the way you glance at any sound. The preview text was visible before the notification faded. It was from someone named Paulette. It said, "He transferred the first installment. We're good. Don't contact me at this number anymore." I sat very still for a moment. I told myself it was work. Scott dealt with pharmaceutical distributors, with accounts, with money moving between companies all the time. There was a reasonable explanation. I picked up the laptop, intending to close the notification and put the whole thing out of my mind. But my hand didn't move toward the close button. My hand moved the trackpad to open the full message. I know that crosses a line. I have thought about that moment 100 times since then. But something in the phrasing, "Don't contact me at this number anymore," did not sound like a business transaction. It sounded like an exit, like someone covering their tracks. The email thread above Paulette's message went back 4 months. I read it in the break room with the door closed, my untouched coffee going cold beside me. Paulette Driscoll, 34, was not a business contact. She was introduced in the first email as a friend of Scott's coworker, someone he had met at a team dinner in March. By the second email, she was someone he was meeting for lunch. By the third, she was someone he was wiring money to. Not company money, not an invoice, not a reimbursement, a personal transfer. $12,000 in April, $8,000 in May. The email I had just read referenced a third installment, amount unspecified, sent that morning, $20,000, minimum, moved from an account I did not know existed. I sat there reading emails for 45 minutes straight. I canceled my 11:30 patient. I told the front desk I wasn't feeling well, which was technically true. What I found in those emails was not a simple affair. I wish it had been. A simple affair would have been devastating enough. What Scott was doing was messier and more deliberate than that. Paulette was not just a girlfriend. She was a woman he had been funding. Her rent, her car note, a shopping account, a trip to Scottsdale in June that he had told me was a work conference. And she knew he was married. There were references to me in the thread, casual ones, the kind that made my skin go cold. He called me the situation at home. In one email, Paulette asked if the situation was going to be a problem much longer, and Scott wrote back, "Less than you think. I'm working on it. Working on it." I read that sentence 4 times. I still hear it sometimes when I am trying to fall asleep. I did not call Scott. I did not call anyone. I closed the laptop, put it back in the bag, and finished my afternoon patients. I do not know how I did that. I have worked with patients in acute distress for over a decade, and I think my clinical training simply took over, put me on autopilot, kept my hands steady, and my voice even while every internal system I had was screaming. When my last patient left at 4:15, I locked my office door and sat on the floor with my back against the desk and let myself fall apart for exactly 11 minutes. Then I washed my face, reapplied my lip gloss, and started making a plan. The first thing I did was call my sister, Gwen, 43, who lives in Bexley and has worked as a paralegal for 19 years. I did not tell her what I had found yet. I asked her, casually, what someone should do if they suspected their spouse was hiding financial accounts. She gave me a list without asking why I was asking. We are that kind of sisters. That evening I went home, made dinner, sat across from Scott at our kitchen table, and talked to him about his day. He said it was fine. He asked about mine. I said it was fine. He did not ask about the laptop. After he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down everything I remembered from those emails. Every amount, every date, every name. Paulette Driscoll. The account number referenced in one of the transfers. The name of the bank. A reference to something Scott had called the side arrangement, which I had not fully understood yet but intended to. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a different kind of person. Not angrier, more precise. I requested our joint financial records going back 2 years, which I had every legal right to do as a joint account holder. I found that money had been moving out of our household account in amounts small enough not to trigger alerts. 200 here, 300 there, and into a secondary savings account I had not known Scott held. From there, the transfers went to Paulette. The total I could document was just under $31,000. $31,000 of our money. Money from the account we had built together to save for a kitchen renovation. Money I had deposited from my own paychecks every 2 weeks. But there was something else. When I went through the paperwork in Scott's home office, methodically, one folder at a time, over 3 separate evenings while he was at the gym, I found a document I was not prepared for. It was a life insurance policy. Not the joint term policy we had taken out together 5 years ago. A separate one. A whole life policy, taken out 14 months ago, with a payout of $400,000. I was not the beneficiary. The beneficiary line listed a name I did not recognize at first. Celia Driscoll. I had to search the name before I understood. Celia Driscoll was Paulette's mother. Scott had taken out a life insurance policy, naming his girlfriend's mother as beneficiary, using our joint finances to pay the monthly premium, and had kept this hidden from me for over a year. I called Gwen the next morning, and this time I told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very calmly, "Evelyn, do not touch anything else in that office. I'm going to give you the name of someone you need to call." The someone was a forensic accountant named Douglas Hale, 60, who had spent 20 years working fraud cases for the Ohio Attorney General's office before opening a private practice. Gwen had worked with him on a case years before. I met with Douglas in his Clintonville office on a Thursday afternoon and laid out everything I had. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said he would need 2 weeks and access to the documents I had photographed on my phone. I gave him everything. While Douglas worked, I kept my life exactly as it was. I went to work. I made dinner. I walked Biscuit. I sat next to Scott on the couch on Sunday evenings and watched whatever he wanted to watch. I had become fluent in a language I had never wanted to learn. The language of waiting, of knowing, of letting someone believe they are still invisible. Gwen came over one afternoon while Scott was at work and helped me set up a separate personal checking account at a different bank entirely. I moved 2 months' worth of my own salary there immediately. I did not move anything from our joint account. I did not want to give him any reason to change his behavior or tighten his access before Douglas was finished. Douglas finished on a Wednesday. He called me into his office and set a 14-page document on the desk between us. In addition to the $31,000 moved to Paulette, he had found 3 more accounts I had no knowledge of. A business checking account in Scott's name only, opened 2 years ago, receiving small deposits from what appeared to be a side consulting arrangement he had set up without disclosing it on our joint tax return. A money market account with a balance of just over $62,000. And a third account, the one that made Douglas pause when he described it, opened in my name using my social security number, my date of birth, and a version of my signature that was not mine. Someone had forged my signature to open a bank account in my name. That account had been used to receive one transfer, $11,000 2 months ago, and then had been drained to zero within 48 hours. If that account was ever investigated, it would look like I had opened it. It would look like I had moved the money. It would look like I was the one hiding assets. I sat in Douglas's office and understood for the first time what working on it had actually meant. He was not working on ending our marriage. He was working on framing me. I asked Douglas how sure he was about the forged account. He slid a page across the desk. It was a comparison, my actual signature from our mortgage documents and the signature on the fraudulent account application. They were close, but not close enough, not to someone who knew what they were looking at. "You need a family law attorney today," Douglas said. "Not tomorrow." I called the attorney that afternoon. Her name was Francine Okafor, 48, a partner at a firm in Dublin, Ohio, who specialized in high-conflict divorce and financial fraud within marriages. Gwen had her number already. I was beginning to understand that Gwen had been quietly preparing for this moment. Since the morning, I called her asking hypothetical questions about hidden accounts. Francine reviewed Douglas's report and the photographs I had taken, and within 4 days had filed a motion to freeze the accounts we could identify as marital assets. She also filed a police report on my behalf regarding the forged account, which Douglas had documented thoroughly enough that the fraud investigator who took the report told me, quietly, that this was not going to be difficult to establish. Scott did not know any of this was happening. He found out on a Saturday morning in September, when he sat down at the kitchen table with his coffee and found Francine's formal notice of legal proceedings in an envelope next to his mug. I was sitting across from him. I had slept very well the night before, for the first time in weeks. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. He said, "What is this?" Not a question, a statement. The voice of someone who cannot quite process that the ground has shifted under them. I said, "It's everything I know, Scott, and it's everything Douglas Hale documented, and it's what Francine filed on Thursday." I kept my voice even. "The account in my name has already been flagged by the fraud unit. They'll want to talk to you about the signature." He set the papers down. His hands were not steady. "I want to talk about this," he said. "I know you do," I said. "You can talk to Francine." I stood up, picked up my coffee, and took Biscuit for a long walk around the neighborhood in the September morning air. When I came back, Scott was on the phone in the living room talking very quickly in a low voice. I went upstairs, finished packing the bag I had already partially packed, and drove to Gwen's house. I did not go back. The fraud case moved faster than the divorce, which surprised me until Francine explained that forging a spouse's signature on a bank account application is a third-degree felony in Ohio, and that Douglas's documentation had been unusually thorough. Scott was formally charged in November. Paulette was interviewed by investigators twice. She had not forged anything herself, as far as they could establish, but the transfers she had received and knowingly spent from fraudulently obtained marital funds put her in a position that her own attorney apparently found uncomfortable because she provided a voluntary statement that corroborated several key details of Scott's financial activity. The life insurance policy was voided. The money market account, $62,000, was identified as marital property and entered into the divorce settlement. The secret business consulting income he had failed to declare on our joint taxes triggered a separate review by the IRS that I was not party to, but heard about through Francine's assistant, who mentioned it the way you mention weather. The divorce was finalized in February. I kept the house. I did not want it, actually. Too many rooms that felt like questions I was still answering. But I kept it for 6 months and then sold it and used part of the proceeds to put a down payment on a smaller place closer to my clinic. 2 bedrooms, a yard big enough for Biscuit, a kitchen with a window above the sink that faces east. And in the morning the light comes in and sits on the counter, and it is one of the most ordinary and beautiful things I have ever seen. Paulette moved out of the apartment Scott had been funding within 30 days of the accounts being frozen, according to the forward address update that came back on a piece of legal mail Francine's office had sent. I don't know where she went. I don't spend time thinking about it. Scott's criminal case is still working through the court system. Francine tells me these things take time. I have learned to be comfortable with time. I want to say something to anyone who is reading this or listening to this and feels the specific particular chill of recognizing something in this story. Not the details. The details are mine, specific to a life I built in a suburb of Columbus with a man I thought I knew. But the moment of sitting in a break room reading something that was not meant for you and feeling the floor quietly give way. That feeling. If you know that feeling, then you know that the instinct in that moment is to close the laptop, to put it back, to choose not to know. I understand that instinct. I also know that I did not survive this by looking away. I survived it by getting very quiet and very careful, and by letting people who knew what they were doing help me do what I could not do alone. My sister, Douglas, Francine, the fraud investigator who treated me like someone worth taking seriously, the colleague who covered my afternoon patients on a Tuesday when I needed 2 hours I could not explain. I survived it by understanding that dignity is not about what you do in the moment you find out. It is about what you do in every quiet, deliberate moment after. You take stock, you document, you breathe, you find your people. And then, when everything is in place and the time is right, you let the truth do what the truth does. It does not need your help to be devastating. It only needs not to be buried.